I find it fun to have encoded messages and stuff like that. And I think it's cool that you can talk to people through dots and dashes over huge distances on the earth, and it's pretty neat.
Some of the younger people who've not heard of old-time phonographs and know about CDs can understand a little about how a CD works to reproduce sound by understanding what an old record will do.
People don't realize how much communications has impacted their lives. I mean, we kind of take for granted that we have cell phones and TVs and computers and telephones, and we don't understand how these things came about.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience.
The museum started in 1990, and it started out of my private collection. We would have friends over to the house, and they would be in awe of the pieces that we had around the house. And we were living in a big old Victorian house in New Britain, which was a great setting for them, and we had them around the living room and the parlor and so forth. And so from that, we said it might be good to share this with the public. Found a small store space in southern New Britain on Arch Street, and refurbished the space and set it up so that we could display what we called the 5 decades of radios. But as the museum moved along, more and more people came forward with other types of media, such as television and motion picture projection equipment. And we realized that we had an opportunity to basically showcase and share with the public all aspects of electronic communication. So we broadened the scope and called it the Vintage Radio and Communications Museum, communications allowing us to cover everything else. So at this point, we house and display radio, television, motion picture projection equipment, teletype, telephone, telegraph. We have instrumentation. We have standard cell equipment. We have a very large paper library, books of interest to the communications area. We have a very, very large collection of records. There's many, many different aspects to the museum. We do a number of educational programs. We do classes in crystal radio building and telegraph, learning how to build and use telegraph systems.
The uniqueness is maybe best evidenced by the crystal radio construction of the crystal sets. Watching these kids wind them coils around those tubes, and the fathers helping them in the background and the mothers, and watching them as it starts to make a little more sense to them as a screw goes in, and then when they go to get their unit tested, and every one of them has the same satisfied smile.
Hey, I hear a radio station. Cool.
I am the Edison phonograph.
I, Bill Dickinson. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin. Japanese...
The museum does a lot of activities both in and outside of the house. We have gone out on many of displays. We were featured at the Connecticut building in the Big E for a number of years. We also have done displays at the Connecticut Public Television's Family Expo, Science Expo that they run in the spring. We have displayed for years at Klingberg Family Center Antique Auto Show because they were one of our first neighbors, and we've had a working relationship with them for years. We have been doing a number of displays and classes for the Family Resource Center up in Massachusetts, which is a large educational networking organization up in Massachusetts. We have done the classes both in-house and out-of-house, wherever people want us to do it. We do lectures and talks about the museum. We've done talks at a number of different historical societies, ham clubs. We'll go and talk at their meetings and display pieces and talk about the history, as well as for schools and school groups.
As an instructor, I find that when the kids come to me, and I get them when they're 14 and 15 years old, they have very little idea where today's technology came from, where it evolved from. They don't know a lot about the people that brought these things to us. They think these telephone poles grew out of the ground, and you know, they don't know. They just don't. And places like this, the museum in particular, which I've brought my students here to show them, you know, how our technology today has evolved from many, many years of experiments and you know, trial and error by people who, you know, dedicated their lives to these things.
I think that getting involved in the museum has helped me with studies, because if I have things I'm wondering about or things I don't know about, there's usually someone at the museum that can answer a question or tell me about different things in science and all kinds of stuff.
It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. It's over humanity.
Lucky Lindy, as they call him, landed at Le Bourget Airport. 0G, and I feel...
We have a fantastic core of volunteers. In many cases, I think the museum is more made up of people than communications items. They are a fantastic group, very diverse in age and background, but all pretty much have a common interest in preserving the history of communications, and especially electronic communications. And we have a listing of resumes of our volunteers that we call the People Power Book, and it is a wonderful read because of the history that many of our people have had in the communications and technology fields. And now many of them being retired are coming back to help preserve the history, and then many younger people who are interested in this history too are helping out.
I remember all this old equipment that's sitting behind me, and I kind of wanted to bring back some of it to life. I remember owning some of it and was unhappy about having given it away or thrown it away in the past. So this gave me an opportunity to rebuild some of the old equipment and put it back on display.
Got interested in electronics early on, even though I didn't know it was called that when I was 3.5 years old. They gave me a broken radio to play with, and it's been love ever since.
My particular area of interest is hi-fi and stereo. I can think back to the times when I was a young kid that my father would bring home stereo equipment, and it really intrigued me. And before he could even set it up, actually, I was already taking it apart to see how it worked. And eventually, I learned a lot about stereos, and the love continues to this day. So this is why I enjoy coming to the museum, because a lot of the things that I grew up with in terms of old stereo equipment is here for me to still enjoy.
So I remember as a child being handed a radio tube and thinking it was pretty neat. And then later on, I ran a small summer business in which I advertised myself as the roving radio repairman. When I later became a member of this museum, these memories came back to me. In fact, a whole flood of memories involving my career as well as my younger days.
What evil lurks in the hearts of men?
The Lone Range had already talked to Cato.
President Kennedy died.
The finances of the museum have been an amazing thing to me all the way along. This whole organization is purely volunteer, and it's privately funded. And as we've gone along, we've developed different little sources, small sources of revenue that have been able to support the process. We sell vacuum tubes. We have a large collection of tubes, and we've sold them both locally and internationally. And the money that trickles in from that has helped support us. We have our repair facility, and we are actually backed up over 2 years in getting repair pieces out.
One of the main challenges that we're going to face in the next 4 or 5 years is going to be able to find that financial support from people who realize what the museum is doing really benefits the society. And I'm hoping that through our various outreach programs that we'll be able to let the donors out there realize that, wow, there's this group of people that have really done amazing things in the last 15 years, and come see and lend their support so that future visitors and generations of people can really enjoy and understand what we do here.
It's one small step for man.
Elvis Presley died today. Troops have...
It's important for towns to have cultural learning experiences and provide outlets for people's creative interests. There's a lot on the historic side, but on the technical side, there's sort of something lacking. The technical interest of the museum really adds to that other side. You know, we're a community that has a lot of software companies and financial service companies, and also a history and science with nuclear power, and this technical museum adds to the interests that our residents have.
It's important to support this museum because even though there are other museums around the country that talk about broadcasting and show equipment, this museum is connected with a very rich local heritage. In fact, if you were to draw a radius of 150 or 200 miles from this point, you would find that most of the significant developments in the history of communication took place, the majority of significant developments. I think that people tend to look at the technology and fail to understand what its significance is about. If you can present that technology from a historical standpoint, then it makes a huge difference. And I think here we're in a position to do that.
I like the word communication in our name, that radio is part of it, but communication is what has changed civilization over time, is what's really changed civilization. Samuel Morse, communication. Bell, communication. Edison, communication. Tesla, attempted communication. Marconi, communication. Sarnoff, it goes on and on. And today, the internet, communication. These are advances that change civilization.
The history of communications, I think, is going to become more and more important as time goes on and the advancement in electronics continues. I think more people are going to want to see where the roots of all of this came from, and that's what we're trying to preserve and share as an educational resource.
Every morning, every evening, ain't we got fun? Not much money, oh but honey, ain't we got fun? The rent's unpaid, dear, we haven't a fuss, but smiles are made, dear, for people like us. In the winter, in the summer, don't we have fun?